Hi everyone. Welcome to the fourth edition of our webinar series, SCIONTalks. Today we have Lubomila Jordanova, which I'm sure all of you know. Lucy is co-founder and CEO of Plan A, Europe's leading corporate carbon accounting and decarbonisation platform. And today with us, Lubomila will share how businesses can design models that combine financial success with measurable environmental and social impact, and how to set up actually your business for financial success. And I'm sure that from her vast experience, we'll know more at the end of this session. Our knowledge will be super enriched, and with her experience with global sustainability initiatives and advising major institutions, she will help us know a little bit more about how to integrate sustainability into our financial strategy and build a company culture that drives long-term and responsible growth. So, hi, Lucy.
Hey,
Thank you for being with us tonight, and we really appreciate your presence here, and super grateful.
thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this discussion.
So let's not lose any more time and start talking more about our theme today. What's the return on investment of an impactful business? Tell us more about that.
So, for those of the listeners that maybe don't know Plan A, we are a company that is now close to 10 years old. And what we've been doing since 2016 has been to develop technology that supports corporates and mid-sized businesses to reduce their emissions while also maintaining financial stability and competitiveness. And in this whole journey, not only that we've supported our clients, but also in a way had to assess what is a sustainable way for us as a business to make sure that we survive and we keep on going while giving advice to others to do so through technology. Sustainability since 2016 has not been, let's call it, so familiar as operating approach that would deliver a lot of value and return on investment because it always was associated to CSR, to not-for-profit, to NGOs and other types of models that maybe were not so familiar. I remember in 2016, we were sitting in Berlin and actually looking in the whole ecosystem. And unfortunately, all of the organizations that we wanted to partner with had nothing to do with this whole concept of businessy, for-profit. And we had to essentially pave the way for an ecosystem that would eventually turn itself into one that would speak about costs and impact, profit and purpose at the same time. To sum up 10 years in two sentences, I can only mention that from today's perspective, the definitions might still seem to many incredibly blurred, but there is a lot more visibility and data for investors to speak to impact entities, to nature tech or green tech companies with the knowledge of how to calculate what is the financial return on investment on their existence.
Great, but sustainability is seen mostly as a cost, not as something that need to be done because that's the right thing to do. What? How can we prove that this is actually something that drives growth?
Yeah. Um, I can start by quoting a lot of studies and data, but I don't think this maybe gives enough validation for someone to open up all of a sudden their laptop tomorrow and decide to invest in this topic, be it by managing the projects that they already have at hand or by investing even their own money. I can speak from the practical perspective of our client base. Plan A works with more than 1,500 businesses of the likes of BMW, Chloe, Payhawk, Trivago, Too Good To Go, and many others. And as you can hear by the names, intrinsically, they're not founded on the premises that they are there to be the benchmark for sustainability. You know, a car business with combustion engines is probably not your ideal reference point for sustainability. What we have seen is that through the history of business development, so to say, and I can go through like the history of economics, we have been taught by our universities or other types of institutions to think about cost structures as purely related to something that is really familiar to you as a financial person, the balance sheet. You know, you have costs and then you have some proceeds that come into the business. You balance the sheet at the end of the month and then you are doing well or not. What has been hidden in this whole process has been actually the costs associated to why does a business even exist? And I usually give an example of a simple product that we all use on the day-to-day basis, a t-shirt. Let's say you go now to a shop and you buy a t-shirt. A t-shirt might cost €5, it may cost 100, and at the end of the day, probably you will judge the willingness to pay, your willingness to pay based on maybe the material, maybe on the label or how you feel about the brand and so on and so forth. Behind a product like this, there's a lot of hidden costs. There's the logistics that brought the product to the shop. There's the materials that actually brought it to even be something tangible that you can touch, like the cotton that had to be grown and so on and so forth. And within that context, there's actually, a lot of associated elements that end up being the what we call sustainability bill. What we do with our software is ultimately calculate what this bill is, and then we embed it into the traditional balance sheet so that we can speak really about the true cost of the existence of a business. And to bring it back to the question that you had, like, what is the cost and how do you make sure that you don't associate it? Well, first you do an assessment to understand where you're standing. Is your t-shirt, sustainable or not? Does it utilize a lot of water? Does it take a lot of logistics? Is there ways to optimize? And then once you know the bill, you then can assess, do you want to invest in initiatives to improve it? Because, and this is the final kind of headline, there is a lot of opportunity to save money by being sustainable, because usually the traditional approach to doing business in the old like economies of scale way doesn't account for the savings that you can do by optimizing logistics and other, and I can go into detail further.
Yeah, for sure. Well, to us in Scion, where we try to help companies that are building in the nature and clean tech space. Um, it's super important to be able to convey to people that sustainability has to be embedded in the core of the business. Is that something that is changing for companies that are not started, as you said, a car company, car production company or something that's not basically a nature business? And is that a changing trend that
Yeah.
they're trying to embed it in their businesses?
2025, unfortunately, the answer is different than what it was in 2022. And I'll be totally blunt. We just finished 2 days ago COP30. This was an event that happened in Belém in Brazil. And this is the Conference of the Parties, the biggest conference of the United Nations on climate change. This year, there yet again was a lot of discussion on giving up on fossil fuels, and there was a lot of hope that this will be the first COP where we fully commit globally as nations of the whole planet to not anymore consume fossil fuels and to create a roadmap to eliminate our dependency on them. For the first time in a long time, I actually heard, even because there were CEOs of fossil fuel companies in the room, which should be invited to the table, but actually they openly disrupted the discussions because they actually have now decided to divest from renewables and go back to the traditional models, companies like Total, like Exxon, and others. What this means is that we are living similarly to what we see on a geopolitical level, what we see on an economical level, in a cacophony and a disbalance that is unfortunately not allowing for a linear progress on the climate agenda. 3 years ago, I could comfortably say that we had a really tangible path for improvement where corporates were committing one after the other. And they felt like there was a bit of a competitive edge if they were to be at the forefront with their statements, with their commitments, with their investments. From today's perspective, it's a little bit more hush hush. Companies are doing a lot, but maybe they don't show it openly. If they are in the business of sustainability, they actually are using this, so to say, gap in the market to speak openly about this. Companies like Resolve, companies like Nesta, companies like others that are inevitably paving the way. And there is a third category that, to me, I would say is probably the one that I'm most excited about because we work with them all the time, is the companies in transition. This is companies that have intrinsically started with a model that is not with the familiar foundations of sustainability. They don't necessarily use renewable energy. They don't necessarily use, biodegradable plastic or packaging that is sustainable. But they have now done an assessment and they're willing to start shifting elements of their existence. The trend is in these three directions, and we're in the times of picking teams, I can comfortably say.
Yeah. Can you share for that third group that you mentioned? Can you share what their assessments are showing? Is it because customers are transitioning and want to use more sustainable products, or it's showing that they have cost savings? What's the actual reason for behind their transition?
Usually we see 3 to 5 different groups of reasons. The first one is investors. We have in the European Union, as well as in the UK, a really stringent agenda that sometimes maybe seems like it's politicized. Like now there's been a lot of talk about CSRD being reduced in scope and all these kinds of things. But the sustainability line of work of the European Commission has not changed. The UK is incredibly fast advancing as well, and even beyond on some levels. And what this means is that if the government says so, then the investors have to listen because this is a framework that they have to adhere to. The second element is definitely consumers. If you're into the B2C segment, let's say you're producing these T-shirts, or if you are producing toys or something along the way, uh, you probably need to understand that there's a segment of the market that speaks the language of sustainability. I am the kind of consumer, for example, that always checks materials, always checks, and I'm not an isolated case, but I can speak to the usual approaches that are taken by individuals. And you buy in that context with the knowledge of the outcome for longevity. You don't want to buy with the idea that this is something that will fall apart or you're going to throw away. The third category of reasons is related to employees. We actually see a lot of employee activism. Some of the best examples of clients that we work with related to a team that maybe sometimes even informally has been shaped. So you think of an ESG initiative that maybe started just as a, hey, let's organize a park cleanup in our city, turning into something incredibly robust and big. And then we have cases in which it turned into its own department, which is pretty cool. And the final bit is probably the fact that you, and this is to me the most significant element, it's really about the financial departments and the financial professionals. We now have been able with our software, because we have such calculations, to reduce between 12 to 15% on an annual basis in terms of costs related to operational expenses or others, just by offering the sustainable option. So even if you select one or two or all of these kind of justifications, you are on the path for optimizing costs, but also securing the longevity of the commitment of your employees, your customers, and also your investors.
Great. Thank you for clarifying those reasons. Well, let's now dive into a bit of the, startup segment. For some, can you share with us some practical steps that a company that is trying to integrate sustainability into financial planning should take?
It's an incredibly important question. And of course, because this is my job, I would start with the obstructions and what are the usual challenges. What needs to happen before this integration even is discussed is that there's at least like some somewhat equal level knowledge of sustainability between the finance and the sustainability department or the operations team, or even if only the financial team is doing this, they need to know the basics of sustainability. What I was explaining earlier about the T-shirt actually is embedded into the concept and the context of a scientific framework called the GHG protocol. This is the greenhouse gas protocol, and this is how you calculate emissions of companies. This is a mathematical model that allows you to understand the CO2 associated to your purchases and to the existence of the business. Within that context, you immediately have a KPI that actually can be associated to money. And you can immediately open up a discussion because you're talking about like literally categories like suppliers and end of use of product and logistics and all these kinds of things. There's a scientific element that looks into this. So within that context, you actually have a way to speak about this. The integration actually, I'll give an example of one of our clients. It's an asset manager in the UK. They manage a massive, vast portfolio of investments. It's a company that has sustainability investments, but also they have something that quite a lot that have nothing to do with this. They have a BI system that uses the KPIs that come from the Plan A system to be added into their BI system. And all of this becomes the balance sheet and the status quo analysis of the portfolio company and of the total portfolio. What this means is that you really have an overview that speaks the language of finance teams, but you add a component that gives them a reference point of performance that is additional.
Yeah, sure. But when it's early on for founders and data is limited, what do they do? How they measure that return on investment of their sustainability initiatives?
There's a bias and an unbiased way to go about it. We obviously, as a software provider, we have the obligation to always say, set up your system so that you can even collect some data. But I know that in reality, this is not always possible. If you're an SME with 10-person, you can't collect data about the daily home, office, electricity consumption, did you charge your laptop? How much of this was, electricity related to you cooking the dinner, and how much was related to having a phone call and a Zoom call or whatever. So within that context, the more biased approach on the return on investment is starting by immediately implementing initiatives because there's a beautiful book that kicked off my sustainability journey. I would highly recommend it to anyone that is listening. It's called How Bad Are Bananas? I'll post the link in the chat. It basically speaks about the day-to-day activities that we have, like, eating an orange or like sending an email and so on. And it just explains like the impact that they have. And probably the more biased but really gratifying approach to calculating the return on investment is having a value, but also metric system that is within your head about, what elements of the company's existence are there to be improved based on what is not good. It's obvious that, driving yourself every single day to the office as one person is maybe better done via bike. Maybe if this is not an option, like, there's ways in which you can substitute. If we're talking about the actual production, or let's say you're this t-shirt company, or you are a e-bike company, or you are, a company that makes shoes or phone cases, I'm thinking of physical products. There's a necessity for you to go through the assessment that is metrics driven, because there's a lot of data that would surprise you.
Yeah, for sure. Um, well, can we demystify now some mistakes that are most common when companies try to measure their environmental or social impact, or the return on the investment on their sustainability initiatives?
I would give quite a few, but more maybe starting with the ones that lead to the most devastating results. It's using spreadsheets. We've heard so many times when companies would come to us that would say, yeah, we've been doing the measurements, of the back of a napkin. We've gathered some data via email, and we send a spreadsheet to, the different department heads. They send us back the data. We did some manipulation and calculation. The science of carbon accounting is really complex. You need to actually be able to use really complex formulas to achieve the highest level of accuracy. The data should not be financial because there's a lot of different methods that you can use. The first and most simple method is a Scandinavian method called the spend-based method, and this is basically translating money into CO2. This is not accurate. You can maybe for those that don't know about this topic, there's 10 ways in which you can calculate the electricity associated to this phone call. It could be the kilowatts per hour. It could be the amount of time that we're spending on this call. It could be the average consumption per Zoom call per minute. Like, there's a lot of different KPIs that can lead us to the final number. And achieving the highest level of accuracy cannot be done via spreadsheets, even if you're a master of the topic. The second bit is actually the level of commitment that you have to decarbonization. I'm fully against. I don't know if we lost Konstantina.
Oh no, I'm here.
Sorry. I'm fully against actually the calculation of CO2 emissions for the sake of calculations. If you need to have an outcome in mind, maybe it's an annual report that will be done at the same time next year. Maybe it is a decarbonization plan. But doing this assessment really gives you, it should be a status quo analysis that doesn't live in eternity, but it's really a stamp for this moment. And then you can move on to the next period with the ambition for, more detail of the data, or better and more optimized data collection, and most importantly, an action plan.
Sure, yeah. But talking about the mistakes, maybe at some point, the most important actually thing that drives, the sustainability of a company, of the culture of the company, is actually the leadership behavior. And how essential is that on building? And is it just the way it's communicated, or it has to be embedded in the whole leadership behavior, everything they do in both personal and professional lives? And tell us more about company culture that actually can drive that.
It's such an important question that you're asking me, and probably this is the first time that someone asks me. So I actually appreciate it a lot because I've thought about it. Uh, the problem to respond to it is associated to what does leadership mean for each company, because there's a placate CEO that goes on maybe speaking about sustainability, but has not been briefed by his team on the context. So there's only an opportunity for them to be part of the storytelling, but they don't know the context of how it is being applied. This creates a lot of issues, and this is not allowing for the CEO to participate in the transformation process. This is when sustainability teams usually are isolated. They're standing alone somewhere, they're preparing the press releases, and they're hoping that the message gets adopted also on a cultural level. There's another side of the story where sustainability lives through the organization, and it's actually an initiative that is driven from the management into the different departments. You usually see in these cases that there's a little bit of a quirkiness to the outcome of sustainability because people are, let's call it, more enthused about the topic, but there's some personal intricacies associated to it. I recently spoke to the sustainability lead of a company called Odoo that we work with. It's one of the unicorns of Belgium. And what's fascinating about them is that actually they embedded sustainability just as a principle. And it was never about the measurement. It was never about but it created so many initiatives within the organization that were employee led. So ultimately, the big idea of the visionary CEO transitioned into these grassroots, let's say, approach to sustainability implementation. There's another version, and this probably one out of three, and I can list another five, but I'll stop myself on the third one, that is associated to solely, a kind of an engaged, centralized approach for sustainability where top down there's a really prescriptive agenda. Like the board and the CEO has decided on numbers, and this needs to happen immediately, in a way, in a short amount of time. We had recently a case of a client that actually had to improve the scoring for one of the certifications that they've gotten, and they ultimately have been given now, the sustainability and the communications team have been given 3 months to improve the score. And the company is ultra sustainable altogether, but they failed on one project, and the board has not been okay with this. And now they've given a short timeline for things to improve.
I hope it works.
I deeply hope as well, because they're going to get in trouble otherwise.
Okay, then before giving the floor to everyone for questions, I have one last question from us at Scion, and with our colleagues who are working to bring this webinar series to life. And it's, can you give us your opinion on where do you see the most promising opportunities for NatureTech to accelerate climate and biodiversity solutions for the next few years? Maybe, I don't know, now long term it's 1 to 3 years, but let's focus on the next 3 years, let's say.
The symbiotic, not always most optimized relationship that we have with nature uh, could deteriorate further if we don't look at solutions that are specifically looking at either mimicking nature or respecting nature by allowing it to return back to its normal form. Um, I actually appreciate solutions that remove the dependency on, on humans, biodegradable materials. There's also solutions that specifically focus on sustainable energy, benefiting from existing resources that we just don't technologically benefit from. Um, I feel like sometimes when we assess opportunities in technology, we overwhelm ourselves, we overcomplicate ourselves by thinking of like hardcore, super complex technology. Actually, in my view, it's really about assessing technologies from the perspective of is this going to be a solution that eventually eliminates its own existence in a good way, or makes itself so prominent that it fully eliminates the alternative? I'll give practical examples like, wind energy fully eliminating the dependency on gas, or, packaging that is biodegradable, fully eliminating the dependency on plastics.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lucy, for all that wisdom that you shared with us. I'll now have the floor for everyone to who wants to ask a question. Bear in mind, I have a question of my own, and also I have one or two questions that were sent to us prior to the start of the webinar. So, does anyone in the room have a question right now? Please go ahead.
Do you hear me?
Yes,
All
Ina,
right.
hi.
Hi. It was nice to hear your talk, and I just shortly want to ask if there is a possibility that you visit us in Plovdiv in person.
Yeah.
And second question, is there a possibility that you do a short workshop with companies from the region in Bulgaria? Because we are a center for clean tech and biomass resource efficiency, but we have the problem that a lot of our potential clients or partners prefer to work in Bulgarian. So this
Yeah.
would be a perfect possibility to ask
As
you
a
that.
as a native, with pleasure.
Exactly. But of course, we can do it also in English. Just that
No, no.
I think maybe the number of interested companies would drop. But I follow your career already longer, as I mentioned to the organizers, because I was living in Berlin, and I would love for my colleagues to get to know you. And because we're going through interviews right now, you were my pick, so maybe we can discuss that further in a discussion if there is any chance, of course. If no,
Oh,
forget
yeah,
about
yeah.
it and focus on the other questions that are for sure very, very interesting as well.
Thank you so much. With pleasure.
I
I
will make the connection.
exactly.
Very good.
No worries.
Perfect.
I come back to Bulgaria all the time. I think the purpose of our discussion also not happening in Bulgarian was because obviously the
Sure.
science is
Yeah.
international, but we should connect with pleasure. It will be an honor.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll try to facilitate that. Great.
Thank you.
So, anyone else with a question? Come on, guys, don't be shy. Okay, then. You can write your questions in the chat if you prefer. But let me ask a question that was sent previously to us about regulations like CSRD, and they're coming into force. What should companies be prioritizing to stay ahead with those?
So just last week, we had a big change in the European Parliament where they voted to fully reshape the legislation on sustainability reporting, and now the reporting will be mainly impacting really large and mid-sized organizations. Before, it used to be also a lot of SMEs and so on. To be fully frank, it's really foolish of any business to think that because of the EU, we now need to like stop caring about sustainability, or all of a sudden this needs to be the priority. I think the European Parliament did a really good job of setting the scene of explaining what the framework of topics is. Sometimes they're not really good at explaining the mechanics and so on, because they might be a bit overly complicated as an institution, but we have the mechanics and they've stayed the same. So the advice that I would have for anyone, regardless of the size of the business, is really for them to focus on doing an analysis of their own performance. We actually have a lot on the Plan A website, even kind of sustainability readiness assessments that are totally for free, and you can see how ready you are for the next phase of your sustainability agenda. And to understand what are the bottlenecks of their institution or even industry, I would say, to prepare for this next phase of sustainability that is on 3 layers. One is legislative, so how prepared you are for the legislation. Second is strategic. Can you and your industry, with your suppliers and stakeholders, transition into the next phase of what is expected from you? Because even if you're a small producer of bolts, you still will be impacted by what's happening in the automotive industry. Even if you're a small producer of glass or mirror, you would be impacted by what's happening in the furniture industry or the forestry industry. And the final bit is also to listen to your clients. They might not speak the sustainability language. I know there's been a lot of disputes in the difference between the Western European approach. We see it. I'm based in Berlin, and we work across Bulgaria, Switzerland, Germany, France, UK, and Scandinavia. And we see that there's cultural differences, but customers are informed in all these places. They speak the language of sustainability, and you might be surprised by how much they actually put attention and value in you being prepared ahead of just the regulator telling you to be so.
Sure, that's really important. I believe that it's the customers who should drive the whole change, actually, when it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so one question from me then. Can you give us some light on what's that personal experience that shaped your approach to building such a purpose-driven company?
I've had both like the most amazing and the most difficult last 18 months of my life from a professional and personal perspective. So it's a good moment to ask this question because I have an honest response for it. I think the biggest battle in our industry has been to actually place ourselves as a relevant and allowed to be on the table participant that is allowed to eat from the same food as everyone and also is allowed to speak. And it's not always been easy because I personally, as a female founder, as a founder of climate tech company, solo founder, I found a lot of ways to be pigeonholed. So it happened, and not that I seek this victimization, so to say. But what this has meant is that you always need to be on the watch of what is the relevance that you bring to any table. And sometimes it's also important to not justify yourself, but make sure that you contextualize your existence as a business. So Plan A has moved through 5 different types of value propositions and models. We have pivoted. We've been quite of a different company. We're now SaaS, but we used to be a donation platform. We went through a data consultancy and a few other types until we got to the scalable model. And what has been particularly interesting is to see that if the values are there, if you're driven by purpose, you will find a way, regardless of the obstacles, and there will be people along the way that are going to keep you on your path and keep you going, because it's just not any job. It's a bit bigger than that.
Thank you, Lucy. And one last question that was just sent to me via email. It's how does technology, meaning it's in parentheses, probably meaning AI, help companies scale decarbonization and improve accuracy of data?
We use AI in a few ways for the Plan A platform. One is for identifying anomalies. So when the data is inaccurate or it doesn't speak to the level of accuracy that was sought, we identify this through AI. Decarbonization planning, usually you need to actually assess hundreds or thousands of businesses to get to a point where you can meaningfully suggest improvements that already have worked somewhere else. And the final bit is actually being able to guide your client into what we call the sustainability transformation journey, rather than simply mechanically telling someone, now gather the data, now prepare the report. There's actually, I would call it like a wave of activities you need to go through. And for some companies, it's a lot more important that they first focus on being with a particular angle of attention of their employees. There's other companies which immediately need to focus on product. And the team and the algorithm that is behind the team actually navigates this journey. We have 5 people that manage 1,500 clients. So there's definitely like the machine more than the human, but the human has navigated for this to be built. So yeah.
Well, and to wrap up, one last thing that came to my mind. Can you share with us, in your opinion, what are some overlooked opportunities for companies that want to create measurable impact?
I'll give 2 options. One is for companies that have found the industry, and the other one is for companies that have not. Starting with the latter, for me, waste management is definitely overlooked. There's so much opportunity to make out of waste money. Slivi is a smet, to say it in Bulgarian. You find actually the possibility to be even a fashion designer by just taking the waste of the textile that is not being used by fashion companies. There's projects like this in France called, one that comes to mind is Renaissance. But it's not enough because there's so much waste out there that is not being used. If you look at examples of, even food production, you can turn this into products that there's shoes that are made out of waste from wine production. There's bags that are made out of, leaves. There's plates that are made out of leaves. And these are the kinds of solutions that I really love. We have clients like Grey Parrot that identify types of waste using AI and cameras and then allowed better recycling. But this to me is a whole universe of domains that could easily be scaled and also is much needed. And also it could be quite lucrative because there's a lot of big players that are usually internationally present that are quite dominant, and they need support because they need someone that is innovative to help. If companies have found their niche, I would say finding an angle to create a sustainability product line can be a good way for them to identify how much money they could be making if they fully transition their business.
Yeah. Well, Lucy, I can talk to you all night, but I know that your time is super valuable, and so is the people. So is the time of the people who have joined us today, and that's why I suggest, if no one else has any more questions, to let you do your stuff, attend to your family, and when you come to Sofia, I hope that we'll see each other, we'll continue the discussion, and we could also invite some people around us for a fireside chat or something. But thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And it's a super interesting topic that we'll continue to elaborate on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining tonight, and we'll see each other maybe next month for the 5th series of SCIONTalks. And don't forget to fill in the feedback form, please. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks.